upon his companions, his family who called to the way of their Lord with wisdom and excellent preaching. Amma ba'da. And what follows of that salutation, I advise you as well as I advise myself to first fear Allah and thereafter be obedient to Him. Eid Sa'id Mubarak. Have a happy, blessed Eid. We're going to continue, insha'Allah, on where we left off in the second part of the Eid khutbah. And that is that we are a community of sacrifice. Allah says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Inna Ibrahima kana ummah qanitan lillah hanifan wa lam yaka min al-mushrikeen. And this is in Surah An-Nahl, the B, Ayah 120, where Allah says, verily, Abraham was a community, an ummah, obedient to God, Hanifa, and he was not among those who associate partners with God. When we look at this ayah, Allah mentions Abraham, which this is what we're in. We're in the season of Abraham. And Brother John and Sister Naima Bey are on Hajj. And they're probably wishing they had some of the water we got here. But they're on Hajj right now, and may Allah accept their journey. And Sister Naima called my family and asked us if we would like her to make a dua for us on Hajj, because you know when you make that dua, Allah grants it. Allahu Akbar. And you know, my dua was that God would forgive me. That's all I want. I don't want a mansion. I don't want a big house. I just pray that Allah will forgive me, inshallah. But Abraham kana ummah. He is they translate this model, a nation. Some translate a model of virtue. But you know, ummah means community, right? So there's no need to even science this one up. There's no need to philosophize this one up. It's very straight language, right? I don't have to ask you to take a intellectual leap with me, right? This is very clear. Abraham was a community, so he is a picture of a community, right? He comes as demonstrating to us what a community is, and then Allah tells us about Him, tells us about this community, tells us about this principle. Qanita lillah. That he is devout. That he, and they translate obedient, and that's a good translation. But qanata, you know, we call this dua qunut, right? We make this dua called dua qunut, right? This is devout. And Allah says, and the righteous women, right? They are devout. Qanita, right? So it's translated as obedient. But the obedience is derived from your devoutness. You are devout. Okay? So that's what you see Ibrahim first. He was devoutly obedient to God. He was devoutly obedient to God. Hanifan. And, you know, Hanifa conceptually means to worship none but God. But Hanifa, and this is a natural disposition that you have. I don't have to come and make you Hanifa, right? This is the language that was used to refer to those during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that never worshiped idols. They were never into idolatry. And before the Quran came, they were called the Hunafa, right? And Ibrahim is known as the Hunafa. It's that one that has this natural inclination, right? Because you don't see Abraham, as Allah says in the Quran, he wasn't a Muslim, he wasn't a Jew, he wasn't a Christian. He was devoutly obedient and submissive to God in his nature, right? He was Muslim. He was submissive to God in his nature, right? And so that's what we see him. Hanifa is that inclination that man has, that inclination that man has to be obedient, that inclination that man has to be devout. وَلَمْ يَكَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And he was not among those who associated partners with God. Now, if we see Abraham as a community, and we see these as the characteristics of a community, we have to see Abraham as a community born of sacrifice. He was born of sacrifice. Imagine being born into an environment that idolatry is normal. Some of you were born into an environment that idolatry was normal. And imagine, all right, I'm gonna make it plain, 2017, on the border of South Park, Houston language. Imagine you're T.D. Jake's son. Or imagine you're the Pope's son, or whoever, just some big religious leader, right? There's going to be a lot of pressure on you to conform to the ideology that your father is espousing. Great pressure on you. Especially when all of the luxuries that you are enjoying, including your food, comes by way of the ideology that your father is espousing. This is what Abraham is born into. He's born into idolatry. And we know Abraham's a principle, right? So this principle is manifest throughout time, but it's epitomized, it's crystallized in the concept of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam was describing Ibrahim, he said, I have seen there's no man that looked as much like Abraham as me. So some people are going to want to go draw a picture, right? The beautiful hadith, right? How his hair laid down on his shoulder. Now he had broad shoulders and speaks about his stare and his eyebrows and all that, right? So some people are going to go draw that. Those who have been sensitized to see Abraham representing a principle will see, well, the principle that Abraham is representing was so much reflected in Muhammad that Muhammad I looked out in the history of religion. And in the history of religion, I never saw a picture of Abraham as complete as I am and what I'm bringing to you by the mercy of God. Right? Allahu Akbar. So, and Muhammad's born into idolatry too. Right? And although his father wasn't the maker of the idol, as Abraham's father was the maker of the idol, right? Muhammad's people were the keepers of the house, right? They kept the house clean, they fed the pilgrims, so they were the custodians of the gods, So Abraham, and they made money. You can make money. You're a custodian of the gods. That's business. That's income. Right? And because everybody makes pilgrimage to see the gods, right? So you have to, if you could, they would be the hospitality managers. That's what you would call them. They made sure that those who came to the house had hospitality. So that was the people of Muhammad. Abraham's people, father, made the idols. So here you have Abraham. Now imagine yourself a teenager, 17, 18, 16, whatever, 15 years old. And you see a flaw in the logic of religion that's pervasive in the society that you live in. And your father is a top figure in that society. You have two choices. You're either going to benefit from the family business, or you're going to point out the logic, the flaws in the logic. Now, I know when I was growing up, and I'm not saying Abraham's father was like this, but I know when I was growing up, we couldn't talk back to, you know how kids talk back to their parents nowadays? You couldn't talk back to my father. You better not even accidentally kick up. You know how people get mad and they kick up rocks? Your feet better not accidentally touch the ground. Huh? So you have to imagine, here's Abraham, a young child. He's asking Dad, why y'all worship this stuff, boy? You know that lamb you ate today? This God paid for that. You know those shoes you have on your feet? This God paid for that, right? So in order for Abraham to even challenge this idea, he had to be willing to sacrifice. He had to be willing to sacrifice his relationship with his father. You know, we place emphasis on him having the desire to sacrifice his son. And that's the big sacrifice. But it began with him having the willingness to sacrifice his relationship with his father. So it's given to you in a story, but the story is just, it's a picture, right? So his people are away enjoying some frolic. And in order for me to fully deliver what I intended to deliver today, we're going to have to finish Jummuah, and then we'll do after Jummuah, inshallah. So those who would like to stay, we've been in the house for 5 days, and most of us are off right now, right? So let's take advantage of it, inshallah. So we'll finish Jummuah, and then we'll have then we'll just say a couple things. But he sees idolatry in the society and sees the flaws in the logic. But what do I do? I'm sitting up here telling these people this is a problem. And they're like, hey, okay, man, get out of here, man. So Ibrahim had to have a strategy. He had to have a strategy strong enough to make those in that environment be able to see the flaw in their logic through self-reflection. Long before he broke them with his physical hand, idolatry was shattered in his intellect. His consciousness of the creation, his consciousness of the logic in the creation, shattered the concept of idolatry in his mind. So then he needed to shatter it in the minds of his people. So he breaks all the idols, right? And he hangs the instrument. The instrument own the biggest idol, the one with the most esteem,